Motion to go into open session.
Move it.
Moved by Mr. Langone, seconded by Mr. DeGiuseppe. Please stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I would just ask that everyone please remain standing for a moment of silence. Last week, we tragically lost one of our students, Jasper Coeza. He was an inspirational young man. Everyone who came in contact with him was better off as a result of meeting him. He had an infectious smile. He worked extremely hard and overcame many challenges. So please join us in a moment of silence. Thank you. Please be seated. Thank you.
Anybody who wishes to speak to the board must sign the podium, must sign the sign sheet over there. If you don't sign the sign sheet, you will not be able to speak. So I'd like to remind everybody, I'll remind you when we go through the agenda items and then we get to the community forum portion. So if you haven't yet at this point, please go over and sign the sign.
What? And yours?
Approval of minutes.
I'd like to move the minutes from September 22nd.
Second?
Langone. Second by Martin. Any questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstained? Motion carries 7-0.
I do. Good evening.
being here. You know, I have some nice news to report. We've had a series of successful open houses at every building except the high schools will be held tomorrow night. A lot of smiling faces in the building, quite a contrast to the past 2 years. So we're really happy about that. The district also has, is thrilled to share that we have 2 all-state musicians who we will recognize at our next board meeting. They are Sinead Buck and Aurelia Casera. So that is an unbelievable distinction, and we hope to bring them and their families here to the next meeting to recognize them properly. Our Lindenhurst Marching Band competed at this weekend's marching competition in Connecticut, the U.S. Bands, and they took first place. We're also going to be hosting a regional contest here in October. Our marching band is certainly something that is a source of great pride for this community. I'm also pleased to announce that Section 11 recently announced its Spring 2022 Outstanding Sportsmanship Team Award winners. The following Lindy teams and coaches that have received these honors. And they were the boys varsity spring track team, coached by Dave Carlson, the middle school boys lacrosse team, coaches Dennis Spinelli and Timothy Rao, and middle school green softball team with Coach Kerry Blum. So we have a lot to be proud of already in this young year. Moving forward, I know that there's been a lot of consternation and discussion relative to transportation, and the board is taking these concerns very seriously. So I'd like to read the following to try to address some of the review of the components of transportation that have caused difficulty for families, its impact throughout the district. And tonight, the district will continue that discussion. But first, I have to share a little bit of historical context since there's been a lot of misinformation. In the spring of 2021, the district and our bus partner, Suffolk Transport, performed a routine audit of using Suffolk's transportation software program called EduLog. It's important that audits such as these are conducted to account for new development and other factors which impact the number of students utilizing transportation services. The results of this audit in 2021 revealed that approximately 100 students were found to be ineligible for bus according to our policy and to New York State regulations. At that time, the district began to inform families of their ineligibility. It's a process that continued through the summer of 2021 via merge letters. However, considering the impact on the families, before going forward, the district opted to investigate these findings further and engaged an independent auditor. This auditor conducted a study using a different software called TransFinder. His findings affirmed those of the initial audit. At that point, to provide advance notice to our community, the families with students who were ineligible were informed in February of 2022. They were told of the auditing results via written letters, and these were sent to these families that were affected. So the issue comes down to, where are we now? Though we cannot change the mileage without a voter referendum, the board's policy committee and the board have worked diligently to try to find flexibility. And they've met as promised and began discussing the path forward and proposed changes to start points and end points used in calculating mileage, a change that largely impacts the eligibility for riders. Most notably, changes include moving the endpoints of the middle school and high school to one single endpoint at the main entrance door. If approved, this change will return bus eligibility to a large percentage of students who were determined to be ineligible last summer. We also know these changes would not negatively impact anyone. All details regarding the potential change are yet to be finalized, depending on board policy and operationalizing the plan. To move forward, the Board of Education would still require 2 readings of its policy. One of them will be held tonight, and the other on October 12th. And the district would need to identify potential costs associated with increased busing. Our provider, Suffolk Transport, needs time to solidify routing and to identify those who would be affected, and then to notify those families, and if need be, hire bus drivers during a time of bus driver shortages. We would also need to notify families of the schedule changes if we go through route optimization for those who are riders currently. The first reading of the updated policy tonight serves as a starting point in the conversation on the transportation policy and how we can work collaboratively to provide the most beneficial outcome to the families of our district. Should the changes to the policy move forward as is, a second reading of the policy will be conducted at our next meeting before being voted on by the Board of Education. Our expectation is that should this policy move forward, Impacted families would be notified of their eligibility no later than October 13th via email, our parent portal, and mailed letters home. As these conversations continue, we will be communicating changes with families as the situation evolves. Thank you. President Hoffman.
Agenda questions. Do any of my colleagues have any questions on agenda items? Mrs. Cunningham? Or who was that?
No.
No?
I'm gonna have these ones.
Okay.
9.5, and Long Island Coalition Against Bullying.
Yes.
I understand this is a program that we'd like to bring into the district. We're looking to approve this tonight to work on, one of our district goals of anti-bullying. We have a lot to do. And we also have other organizations, I think, that we can look into, or organizations that we do use, that I'd like to really understand that we're making a real concerted effort to look at not just one piece. So whereas this is on for tonight for a vote, if we're going to use this organization, this isn't a one and done, but we're hoping that this is just a piece. And we're going to be networking with the organizations we're currently using as well as maybe others that we need. Is that correct?
It is correct. We recognize that combating bullying is a multi-tiered approach. So a set of lessons that focus on empathy, anti-bullying, understanding the impact of our words and behaviors, and social media is a piece of a larger strategy and a broader strategy. As we discussed, there's certainly no end to what we can do. We know that we're evolving a plan. We also are forming a community coalition, as I've talked about. We're bringing to the table a lot of our resource providers in this community starting next week, and with time, we will conduct a needs assessment, the needs that we have in the district, the resources that we have available, and how we can articulate them to the community so that we can build a web of support that extends beyond the schools and into the community. This is a piece of that puzzle, a small one, and we have a lot of work to do, but we know that this would be beneficial.
Thank you. I'm also looking into if we are bringing in, or if we have other organizations that we're using, that possibly we can have presentations from them, for us and for the public, to understand the other pieces of the puzzle that we're going to put into place going forward.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Anybody else, any of my colleagues have any questions on agenda items? Okay, did anybody sign the sign-in sheet?
There wasn't one there for you.
Was there not a sign-in sheet?
Not for agenda.
Not for agenda items. Only for community forum.
Not for
It
agenda?
wasn't an agenda item, so
Okay, okay.
Yeah, let me show it to you, just so I don't.
Okay, so the people that sign with the topic that says bus, that would be an agenda item.
Okay, that was underneath this on the paper, so I didn't see that, so
Okay,
I'll
that's
sign it
fine.
now.
So, looks like Chris, Voss, Theo.
Chris B, is there a Chris? I can just skip over.
Chris B? No. Stephanie, last name with a K? Now, these people are, I'm sorry.
Who's there?
Kim Wallace,
Yeah.
would you like to come up and speak? Absolutely. No problem. Just go up to the podium and give us your address, please. Thank you. 804 Center Avenue? Thank you.
So I'm here at the bus. I live on Center Avenue my entire life. The bus stop has been there for, to my knowledge, my sister's 39, so it's been there for 35 years. They have decided to take this bus stop away, and they want me to take me and the several people that live on this end to walk from my house, it's 5 minutes to the bus stop. From the corner, it's even longer. I don't think it's fair. It's dangerous, because if you've ever been, anyone ever been on Center Avenue, it's half a mile long. People fly down that road. There's no stop signs. I'm sorry, I have a couple other points that I think need to be addressed about this. The bus already passes there as well, so why would you remove a bus stop and make everybody on one half a mile length block come into one spot if the bus is not going in any other direction but past the same bus spot? And I also have questioned people. I went on a Facebook group, I asked people that, what is your bus stop? Like, how far away is it? Not a single person said their house was more than 5 houses away. Mine is over 12. So I really think they need to reconsider, especially if they just cut buses. Like, if all these people, less people on buses, why are you cutting even more bus stops now?
So could you tell me when the bus stop was removed?
This year.
This year.
Yeah.
Mrs. Wallace, this is an issue about a move bus stop, not of ineligibility, correct?
Yes,
So I'm going to ask, and I don't know if you've called the transportation office.
I did. She's not very nice.
Okay. And if you'd like, we leave your number, we can certainly get in contact.
Absolutely, because I think it's completely unfair. I think, like, if I'm walking 5 minutes, the kid who's several houses down is walking even longer. I mean, I don't think it's right. I think there could be common ground, that if we have several of us down here, we should at least get one stop. I don't know. You know, there was 2, give us at least 1. Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you.
You leave your number, we can share it.
It's a cricket.
The mascot. The mascot, isn't it? The mascot. It's on patrol.
Okay, so Victoria O'Neill.
Good evening. So you're my full address or just my street?
Just
137th Street between Buffalo and Catskill.
Thank you.
As of right now, there's about 14 children on our street that between now and the next 2 years will be attending the high school. To my knowledge, there used to be a stop, I think on Catskill there was a stop on Catskill and 36th Street. We're not eligible. Nobody on my block is eligible for busing. When I map it out, now I don't know how they map it according to the district standards, but I think I read online that the guidelines is you have to be 1.5 miles away. We're 1.6, and nobody in our neighborhood is eligible for busing. But I see every morning, I see children on 36th Street waiting for the high school bus to pick them up. So, you know, my children right now are in the middle school. I'm kind of, I think a couple of us are here kind of worried about what happens next year when they're attending or the following year. And we have many people in our neighborhood that are, that have full-time, that, you know, aren't stay-home parents or full-time. I'm a teacher. I have to leave the house by 5:30, 6 in the morning. To think about my children having to walk from our house, you know, 1.6 miles to, I know maybe our grandparents used to say they did that years ago, but I mean, now to walk to the high school is, or going across Wellwood or down Sunrise is devastating to me. So I really hope that we can figure out how our neighborhood can get busing. We have students that are there right now, they're riding their bikes, they're walking, and if we can figure out a way to change this.
Okay, so just so you know, the recalculation of the mileage based on the policy changes is not just the 100 and something people that were affected. It is all of Lindenhurst. So all the routes are going to be looked at, all the homes and all the people, and everybody is going to be recalculated. Okay?
How much
I want to add to, which will be new, if adopted with this policy, what the board and I will be putting in place is a regulation that allows families to appeal. So that if you are still determined to be ineligible, we will have an appeal process which didn't exist prior to this. And then from there, we can take a measurement and explain to you how it came to pass if you were ineligible or eligible based on the appeal.
How soon in advance, just planning ahead, how soon in advance are you able to find out if you're, now, like I said, my children currently are not at the high school level. But how much in advance would I be able to find out if we'd be eligible? You know, I don't want to wait till the month before.
Right, our determination will be official by October 13th. So that's the date. If we're able to do it sooner, then we certainly would, but that would be the date that we would look for.
And then currently children, if we do find that our neighborhood is eligible, children that are having to walk right now, that would be overturned and they would be eligible to take the bus?
Correct. Correct.
Well, you answered all my questions.
Katie Belcano?
Katie Lopez, 209 33rd Street. I had actually wanted to ask my questions after you guys had spoken about the changes in the policy, because I wanted to hear what you said first. So I don't want anything that I question to be perceived as an attack or anything, because I really wanted to hear what you had to say first. My questions regarding transportation are, in the policy change, there's something, a wording of, sorry, I can't find my notes. Publicly accessible. So what does publicly accessible mean?
So that means basically any route that is available to the public, so private roads would not be used to calculate the measurements.
So if a route was calculated and the students had to walk, say, across the field for Daniel Street or through the back parking lot of the school?
A field, no, but if there's a road behind the parking lot and it's publicly accessible, that would be included.
That would be included.
Yes.
And who determines that public accessibility?
If it's a publicly maintained road,
If it's
yeah.
publicly maintained road. Okay. So there's just some safety concerns.
Can I just clarify that too? It can also be a private road if the owner of the road gives permission according to the New York State regulation.
Okay. So there's just still some concerns, and I want to thank you foremost, first and foremost, because I did look and see the changes you made, and you definitely heard the community and what they had to say and you responded. There's still a number of people who are affected where they have to cross at Harrington, and that Harrington by Johnson's Funeral Home. And I, at 41 years old, wouldn't cross there at any time of day, let alone at 6:45 in the morning, in snow, rain, sleet. It's a dangerous road.
Greg, can you explain the legal terminology?
Okay, so you're looking at.
I'm sorry.
So there is a procedure by which the law provides for a child safety zone, which allows people, if there's a series of factors under the law, that if a road meets a certain number of those factors, it's deemed unsafe, and then there allows the district to bus the children in even though they are below the normal threshold.
Unfortunately, the child safety zone was performed for our area from two different starting points, 203 33rd Street and Amy's address on 39th Street, and that crossing that I'm talking about did not meet the criteria for a child safety zone.
The only way you meet that criteria is.
Excuse me, please, if you could just please sign up, you can speak right after this woman. Mrs. Cunningham?
So, Mr. Belpano, I walked that,
I heard, and thank you for doing that.
and I was shocked. I'm a pretty calm person, and I was shocked. And
And you didn't do it at 6:45 in the
And I
morning.
did not do it at 6:45 in the morning. But I have to say, there are certain things that we have control over and certain things that we don't. And this child safety zone piece where it is something that I'm personally going to look into. Because from what I understand, it's a very old system that's been in place for a long time. And if this has been in place for 20 years, things may need to be updated. We are, the board is part of the New York State School Boards Association, where we can bring resolutions to the floor so that we're supported by that body. So this is something that will be looked into to better understand child safety zones, what it entails, because safest route, what they consider a walkable route, might really not be the best.
Agreed.
And that one is the case in point.
And I
You
didn't
know
even,
exactly where you are.
I didn't even talk about that there's not sidewalks for much of the route. It snows, even if there were sidewalks, people don't shovel them. Now we're walking kids in the middle of Charles Street, you know.
And there's certain things that at this point we can do,
Right.
and we're trying to do as much as we can, but there are certain things that are hands in time with the State Department, State Education Department. But it doesn't mean we can't look into it and better understand. So, understood, absolutely.
Mr. Galvin, do you want to explain the criteria that the state uses in calculating the mileage? That they don't necessarily use the safest zone, but the shortest distance between the house and the school?
So, the district finds itself placed in a box. As it was mentioned earlier, the voters approve what the mileage limitations are, and that determines whether a student gets a bus or not. Not based upon safety. The board agrees with really all of your concerns, and I think that's why they work so diligently to try and get this policy revised. It's simple geometry in terms of publicly available routes. If there's a publicly available route and you use the shortest publicly available route to get to the school and you're inside the limitation, you don't get it. And they hear you and they understand that. And it's not about safety, it's just about sheer numbers and geometry. And so the child safety zone is one of the ways to try and get around that, and I understand your frustration that the specific area you're talking about doesn't qualify. That happens in a lot of communities. The only other option beyond this is a voter referendum to either abolish the limitations in terms of the mileage or to lower them.
Yes, I understand what you're saying, that you know, the interpretation and how the law's written is that you're legally bound. But to say that you're talking about children getting to school and that it doesn't, the safety of them doesn't play into it, and, you know, that's just, it's frustrating, like you said.
And the thing to keep in mind with the school district, like any other municipal entity, it's a creature of statute. And it can only do the things that it's authorized to do by virtue of the law. Right? And this is a frustration we've seen in the past couple of years with schools and everything we've seen that's gone on. We're bound by the law, and we hear you. And we're not saying it's the safest route.
Right.
We're just saying geometrically it's the shortest route. And it is what it is. And unfortunately, that line oftentimes, the line in the sand, the proverbial line in the sand, and one house gets it, and then the next house doesn't get it.
Well, and if it was simply just about one house gets it, but when you're talking about rerouting and looking at how they have kids route, you know, for me personally, if this passes, my problem is solved. But my neighbor up the block, it's not. And they now have to walk, one of the routes was through Daniel Street School. Another one was to get to the front door of the high school, was to come through the back parking lot, where all the staff and kid drivers are coming in, you know, to walk through the parking lot and around the building to the front door. So there's that frustration piece there, and I think I appreciate you saying that you'll continue to look into that. I had one more question on agenda items, a different agenda item, 9.5 again, the lockout. When I looked at the contract, it just mentioned that there'd be a parent meeting. Was that one parent meeting, the presentation that they gave at the last board meeting, or there'll be another one? Great, because I think a lot of people would benefit from that and enjoy hearing.
No, we intend to have a parent meeting where we'll talk about bullying, the impact, identifying signs. We recognize that to be multi-tiered. There also is a staff training that we're looking for as well.
And is this primarily targeted for the middle school? Because it looked like it was one faculty meeting, mostly working with middle school students.
At this time it is. It is a new organization that we're engaging with here. So we want to make sure that we forge this partnership, do it well, and then consider where we go next.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, is there anybody else that signed the list to speak? Can you get that list?
Yep.
I
Yes, my name is Robert Harris. I'm 323 South 12th Street, Lindenhurst, New York.
Thank you.
I just want to know, where are the studies? Could we see the audits? If there was 2 audits done, can we see copies of these?
You're free to request the reports. If you'd like to go through the Freedom of Information Act, and you certainly can request those. I can tell you that most of them have confidential, personally identifiable information with students' names, and a lot of it would be redacted, but you're certainly able to do that.
Okay, and you said like the shortest route, how are they actually measuring? Because when I went on the website, it shows houses on 15th Street that's 5 blocks away from me still not getting buses. If I'm 400 feet away, how are they not getting buses still? Like how is the measurement, is the website gonna be updated when this is all done?
So what's going to happen is part of what the board has done is what's in the board's discretion is the ability to do the calculation. So the mileage limits are by voter referendum. How we calculate from the residents to the district is up to the board. And that's what the board has done, is try to maximize the potential to bring people into getting buses.
Well, I'm not sure how the website's working now, if it's getting people not getting buses.
So what's going to happen under the new calculation measure is they're going to use the furthest distance of a resident's dwelling, give you a little bit more feet.
Okay.
And then when you run that, you take the point perpendicular to that, to the public route, and you run that public route right to the front door of the school. And then instead of stopping in the street, the way the old policy did, the board's trying to give additional distance by going right to the front door.
So the new parents will get notification, like my neighbor next to me that doesn't get the bus right now, he'll get notification that his daughter will get the bus?
If you qualify.
If I'm 40 feet away, he's further away, you know?
If you qualify.
Okay, so, and who do I have to speak to about get this audit? Because you guys knew that look, this was about, you should have brought it with you. It would be nice to see it.
The district clerk is Donna Maloney.
Okay.
You can contact her.
And the audit was done through the state or from the bus company?
As I answered previously, the first audit was a routine audit that we've done with our bus transportation.
Through the bus
And then
company?
we asked for an independent audit.
Because I heard that we got a new bus company in like 2009, just because it was a little cheaper, but you didn't realize how they were doing the measurements, and that's why the children lost the bus.
I can't speak to that.
Okay, because I just want to know when the bus company decided to change the measurements, that's all. So, okay.
Okay, thank you. Okay, does anybody have any other questions regarding agenda items? You want to get up? Thank you. Can I have your name, sir?
Mike Ficolor.
And your address?
Address 160 South 7th. My question actually has to do with the additional distance that they're going to be giving. It's going to the front of the school. Do we know the exact distance that's going to be, just so we can make, some kind of determinations?
Still trying to figure out this month. So I manually remeasured it with a measuring wheel. It's approximately 700 feet at the high school for families that are on the west side of the community. For the middle school, it's approximately 250 additional feet, give or take. And it goes directly to the door.
When you say west side of school, that is coming in through Charles Street?
So, yeah, so if you think about the way the board policy is currently written, there's 2 endpoints. It's the shortest location to one of the 2 endpoints. It's either the cafeteria entrance curb location or the main entrance curb location. If the new board policy is adopted, it takes away the cafeteria entrance location as an endpoint and makes the main entrance of the high school as the only endpoint to measure off of. So anybody who lives effectively to the west side of the high school would have to travel through the publicly accessible route through the parking lot of the high school to get to the front of the school. So it adds about 700-ish feet, give or take.
Okay, I measured it today, it came out to about 1,000 feet, but,
It could be.
just give me info. The other question is there any intention to reroute after this is done? After this, the routes that we were provided, that's supposedly right now the shortest distance, are those going to change?
Inherently, every route that is impacted by the change in mileage would the shortest available route would have to change for those, yes.
All right. That's all I have, thanks.
Thank you. Does anybody else have any questions?
Amy Botch, 33 39th Street.
Thank you.
I'm going to talk about transportation, but I want to thank Mr. Davidson, Mr. Giuseppe, Ms. Cunningham, Ms. Martino, and Mr. Van Wert. They came, Mr. Van Wert, Ms. Cunningham came, and we walked. We watched 3 cars blow a stop sign. We watched other cars fly around somebody trying to make a left where there's no crosswalk, no stop sign. We didn't really want to cross, but we had to get the measurement. I appreciate every effort, but there has to be another party to do the child safety zone. Because Eastern Suffolk BOCES is giving you the shortest. Safety is not an issue. They don't care. The only way you can deem an unsafe zone is if the child will cross the train tracks. And somebody has died every year for the past decade on Wellwood. And that should be enough to say that these kids can't cross unless it's at John Street and Wellwood where there's a crossing guard. Not only am I completely appreciative of the policy being revised and everybody's efforts, but they need to define safe. And I think we need to look at maybe another party evaluating routes. So I appreciate everybody's efforts, but the safety, especially with the Board of Education, when we trust our kids, basically, they're there with you in school more than they are at home at this point. We're trusting their lives on transportation and in school. We just have to really emphasize safe. But again, thank you everybody for your efforts, and I really appreciate the walk. And I really appreciate everybody working and revising the policy.
Thank you.
Ms. Bosch, if I could, so I'm not a walker, I don't have a walker's body, I ride my bike.
Okay, I would not cross at Charles Street.
And I hear you. So, I don't know if you heard, Mrs. Cunningham made a comment before. This is one of those scenarios where, like, as a board, like, we kind of have to uphold the law. And we may not agree with it, but the law is the shortest route, not the safest route. I don't think anybody up here agrees that that's the right thing to do for kids. I know I personally do not. What we can do, and what we are doing, is we're a member of NISBA, which is the New York State School Board Association. It's essentially a lobbying arm that basically we all get together in different districts, and we ask for policy that then those lobbyists go and they address the Senate and the Assembly. That's one organization. Probably the most effective tool you have, and you see the camera over there, that hopefully get my good side. The best possible thing you can do is to be appealing to your state senators, your assembly people, because they control the State Department of Education. They vote on those laws, we do not. Okay. It's a hot topic. It's one I think we all pretty much agree on. But to really help get substantive change, you need to be addressing those people. And then one thing we are taking back from that, Mrs. Cunningham mentioned that the child safety zones, those calculations are based on something 20 years ago. It's not a BOCES thing.
It's a little older.
Yeah, probably when I still had hair. So it's a long time that it needs to be revised. So those are the kinds of things that we can work within the confines of that. We just can't unilaterally say, you know what, you're right, safest, not shortest, but we agree with you. And that's why, and I want to publicly thank Mrs. Cunningham and Mrs. Martino for doing all the work to go and actually get that policy in place. And I hope you realize, I know it gets contentious, but as a board, we're really trying to do the best we can for our children. But again, like it or not, within the confines of the law. So hit up your assemblymen, hit up your state senators. That's the best thing you can do.
Shouldn't really be called the child safety zone evaluation, though. They can just call it shortest distance zone evaluation because it's not safe.
I hear you, but thank you for your comment.
All right, thank you, everybody.
Consideration of consent agenda.
I'd like to move the consent agenda as presented.
Moved by Mr. Langone.
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Martino. On the question, seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Opposed, abstained, motion carries 7-0-0. Mr. Davidson?
I'd like to take a moment to recognize somebody who was just granted tenure today, and the cameras are rolling for you. So live on Long Island, Simran Gill, if you would please stand and be recognized. Let's give it Moran is a math teacher at our middle school. She's surrounded by colleagues and leader of the department as well as some family. And I want to tell you, the granting of tenure here, I've already come to know in my short time, is not an easy task. It really is through rigorous evaluation, and it really represents that somebody who's worked hard and committed to be reflective and open and committed to growth as well. So I'm glad to be working with you, so my congratulations to you and all.
Community forum. Mrs. Saylor. Can I have your address, please?
I'd rather not, but everyone knows where I live. I'm on Indiana Day.
Okay.
All right, so I was actually going to follow up on what I spoke on September 7th, but prior to coming here, I had a parent asking me to look at her IEP. She was really concerned because her daughter, who's a freshman in college, has a disability where she can't hear, needs extra time.
Mrs. Saylor, do you realize we really can't speak without?
No, I know, but I'm just saying, giving you the example of what's going on. So basically, her daughter was under the impression she was still classified at night. Now, my son is going to college as his IEP, and they're abiding by his laws as best they can. So the concern here, and why I'm bringing it up, is if someone could explain to me, if possible, the declassification process. It seems like a lot of students are being declassified, some very early on in the year, some very late. In my experience, my son was a junior, and because his scores were so great, it didn't matter that he was autistic. He was fine, and he didn't need any help. Never mind that he was also very anxious when it came to testing. I said no. I made sure I said no. My girlfriend actually said no. I looked at her IEP. It said declassified, and what's going on is it gets passed off as if the students still have an IEP, and it looks like they're not losing anything, but they are. But the testing mods are still there, if I'm understanding that correctly. And parents don't understand that their children are being declassified until it's too late, which in this case, she's in college and now she has to get reassessed as an adult. So my question here is, how are we helping parents understand that in their meetings, they are able to have a parent advocate, or are they presented with a list of parent advocates, or are they kind of like left alone to their own understanding of what an IEP is? Now, anyone who has a child with an IEP knows that it can range anywhere from 15 to 20 pages. So reading that is overwhelming. So I'm just curious, we're declassifying some students that still need services. What's the explanation for that?
I don't know that we're declassifying students who need services. I can't speak to that. I would like to believe that when we go through the CSE process, it is something that we're working to with parents, and decisions are made as part of the committee.
Our
And parents are a part of that committee. So I think I'd be hesitant to say that we're declassifying students who continue to need services, because the purpose of declassification would say that the student is ready to generalize and transition. So that, I'm just a little cautious about the language.
Right.
I'll ask if Ms. Brennan would just talk a little bit about process, but I do want to address that.
Sure, so declassification happens only through the CSE meeting, so the parents aren't, so the parents are a part of those meetings, and there's various ways that students can be declassified. Sometimes students are so ready to be declassified that they're declassified as of the meeting and the services discontinue as of that meeting. Other times students are declassified with support services, So the committee, with the parents' input, may decide that student A is declassified and no longer needs certain services, but they still need extended time on test, so they may still get their testing accommodation. So the manner in which a student is declassified is always through a CSE. Whether those services extend beyond that CSE are always decided at the table, and those are communicated with the parents, and it's a collaborative decision.
Right, so, I was just gonna say that. So the problem here is, are the parents being told, your child's being declassified, but we are keeping the modifications? Because in the situation with my girlfriend, she actually said, no, I do not want her declassified, because I explained to her, some colleges do continue, but you have to have the IEP. Now, in my situation, I made sure they wanted to declassify my son, and I said, absolutely not, because I need this for him later. You know, if it helps him. If he's in college and after the first year he's like, Mom, I don't need this, then he advocates for himself. But I just wanted that transition, and in this situation, her daughter doesn't have, she can barely hear, you know, so she's deaf in one ear and needs extra help, and she doesn't have that now. So I'm just curious, especially for our kids who are transitioning, whether they have anxiety or a developmental disability, should we be declassifying them no matter what? Like, should we keep that as far as an IEP? I don't know how that really works, to be truthful, but I just feel like, had I declassified my son, and he went, and he had all this anxiety, and he couldn't function in college, so I just did him a disservice, and I just feel like, when they were pushing it, in my experience, I was being pushed for declassification, and I actually had to firmly say no. You know, so I'm just, and I know what the process is. What happens to parents that don't? Are they being, anyone who has an IEP, are we telling them, hey, here's a list of parent advocates if you feel you need help understanding anything? So that's basically the question.
So there's a couple questions in there. The college piece is much different than the school age or the high school piece. So we actually work with SEPTA very closely, and we have done presentations at SEPTA about that transition piece and how the IEP differs in college. College more looks at the last psychological evaluation, and students are more geared to advocate for themselves at the college level. So various colleges have different advisors and admission processes where students can go to those areas and they can explain that they have had accommodations in the past. They can obtain an old copy of their IEP, an old copy of a psychological evaluation. I mean, in some cases, it's even a 504 plan. And then those colleges will implement those changes. But the difference between the high school part and the college part is that it's really the responsibility is placed on the students. They have to be their self-advocates in that regard in order to seek those accommodations.
Right, but if the parents don't even understand.
Sure, so that's why we do those things with SEPTA, and we try to present on it, and we try to get that information out as much as possible. We do have exit summary meetings with all of our exiting seniors, and we try to explain those things there as well. It is a huge transition, and it is a big adjustment, so we do the best we can to communicate that. I'd be misleading if I said those SEPTA presentations are well attended, but we're doing what we can to try to get that information out there.
I just want to make sure that another parent doesn't fall into this situation with their children, because in this case, you know, she's going now as an adult to get her, you know, reevaluate and get this, and we all know that, I mean, let's be honest, for my son, since he's 3, I know that if I lost something, I was going to have to work very hard to get it back for him, and, you know, once they're in, I mean, yes, we have an exit form
Sure.
for my son, but he can take that to his advisor, he can take that to his professor and say, hey, I'd like to utilize my extra help. That's because I knew that.
Right.
You know.
Well, I mean, in terms of your friend, I can't speak specifically to that, but I would encourage you to ask her to reach out to me.
Sure.
Perhaps it's not too late. Perhaps there is some guidance or some information that I can give her that may help her and her child in college now. So
Thank you so
it's
much.
hard to discuss it in this format.
No, right,
That they're being declassified, they're keeping them modifications. I think that's where the disconnect is.
that's what it was.
When somebody is declassified, but the modifications are still being kept in place, that's the confusing part. I think that needs to be very clear to a parent.
So now, the reason I am actually here to speak, thank you very much for that. So, on September 7th, I asked several questions pertaining to changes made in the district's code of conduct. I was told I would receive it and my answers via email, but I have not. I will address my questions again,
But before I do, I once again am advocating on behalf of the student that is being targeted by my child's aggressor. Social media is the weapon being used. The aggressor has now taken to sharing not only his target's phone number, but his mom's phone number. The aggressor has shared both phone numbers on his social media gaming site to complete strangers. These gamers have called the mom and the child at all hours of the day, and the calls are coming from anywhere from Staten Island to North Carolina. The aggressor himself is also texting inappropriate content about the mom to the target, which we all know can be very upsetting. I know that you don't like the word target, but that's what they are. I don't like the word victim. That's not what they are. Our targets are non-confrontational and non-aggressive. The aggressor is vulgar, intimidating, and their power grows from the lack of consequences to their actions. Now, I will address my questions. What are we doing as a district about the social media harassment that is originating within our schools? Anyone?
Social media harassment.
Mrs. Taylor, you and I have had conversations as well. I'm not saying that LICAP is a panacea for anything that we're working on. We've taken into consideration the parent plan that was presented to us. We're looking at our DASA protocols and reporting mechanisms. We're looking at ways to intervene for those who, and the term is target, as for DASA, that's what it's called. Look how we intervene in order to better support the target and advocate for it. But we also have to look at the aggressor, because that's the other terminology. And how do we change behavior and intervene to make sure that that student doesn't continue in that path. I can't speak to the situation. It would be irresponsible for me to talk about that. I can tell you that this is not something that is taken lightly, and reports are, when they're generated, or seriously investigated. I know that that was not your experience. We've talked about that as well. And we are committed to addressing this in certainly multiple ways.
All right. So I'm just going to go down the list of my questions. So how are we letting students know in situations with social media that there will be consequences? Have we done anything, changed anything in our code of conduct to let the students know that there will be consequences, whether it's out of school or in school? And most of the times, we have to understand, I'm going to jump around my questions because you did touch on some of the things that I was going to ask, but most of the time, the stuff that's happening outside of school is because it originated in school. So we can't say, oh, well, it happened out there, which I've heard many times. It happened outside of school. No, but it started in school. So how are we letting, or how are we changing things within the district to let these kids know anything you do online to a fellow student will be handled and there will be consequences?
That message has been loud and clear throughout our schools. It predates me. I know that that's something that we're very conscious of. The excuse that it happened outside of school is not something that we tolerate. DASA doesn't allow for that. The material nexus is the fact that these students have to attend school the next day together, and it has an impact on those who are suffering from an imbalance of power. So we certainly don't take that lightly. Some of the lessons with LICAP, we'll talk about that DASA. We'll certainly introduce that to parents as well. That's one piece of it. There certainly are assemblies, but we know that assemblies are catalysts. They're not the end-all and cure-all, but they are going on throughout the district and have been organized, and they are a focus of conversation and communication. We're looking at technology standards, which require our implementation of K-12 messaging relative to the impact of social media and understanding that as well. I think there's a lot that's going on. There's a lot that all districts have to do because we're just learning the impact that social media has, not only in the sense of bullying, but on self-image and how that affects particularly females and on and on. So it also leads to a lack of empathy as well. So there's a lot of messaging that's going on. That doesn't mean that students aren't going to still make mistakes and still do those things, and we recognize that. Part of what I talked about before, and I don't want to beat a dead horse, but it's a reality. We've talked about this as well. There is a disconnect between what the school can do and what goes on outside. And there are some times that law enforcement has to be involved, and there's a disconnect between the two. And that's what we're working to do, is partner with Community Coalition and to work with organizations that can help us to bridge that gap as well.
When
It is a very different life now. It is 24/7 that these children do live, and it's very difficult, I understand.
So when I spoke on the 7th, I spoke about, in regards to Lindenhurst Academy and homeschooling options that were suggested to a mom. How will the district better help parents from placing their children in the wrong setting instead of handling the problem behavior?
I'm not sure I understand that question.
So, when I spoke on the 7th, I spoke to a situation where a mom's son was being bullied, and it got to the point where he couldn't function. He literally could not get out of the door to go to school. She spoke to the school. They sent him to the academy in hopes that it would help him. It did not. September rolls around, and he still can't. He's so anxiety ridden, he can't go to school. So they tried to send him the first week, didn't work. So the next option they gave her was to homeschool him. My point is that had we handled the behavior of his situation way back, instead of sending him to the academy, this child wouldn't be at home. You know, so how are we educating and helping parents who have children who are going through these things, you know, and kind of jump ahead of the situation before it gets to a point where the kid is paralyzed in his anxiety or his fear of going to school because he's going to be facing a situation?
I think part of that is we would need to be able to speak with the parent. So I don't know what happened in that circumstance, that situation.
As far as DASA, I appreciate the presentation. Is that something that parents all over our district are going to be able to see and easily find? I know there was a situation. I know there was a situation with the page this week because someone was trying to file and they couldn't get through. So parents really need to know that what they can and can't do.
As we said, we're going to have parent communication. We have a parent meeting that's like that would be a part of it. But the presentation was posted on the website. It's readily available for all. As is the tab, and we did have a reporting mechanism with the form, but we, as you know, we immediately remedied that. And
right. And we appreciate that. Okay, hold on. So some of it is, you've already mentioned some things. And you did mention the parent plan, so I'm going to throw this in, I was just going to read it. What intervention and proactive measures are being taken to make this year better for our students? In June, it was stated that 80% of the parent plan I presented to the board were suggestions that weren't even thought of. How much of the parent plan is being implemented into our schools? What parts of it, and what parts of it to help this ongoing situation within our schools?
We talk about percentages. What I can tell you, and what I appreciated about the parent plan, it is not unlike what we believe. And I said this earlier. The intervention for bullying and aggressive behaviors, and even self-injurious behaviors and mental health, is a multi-tiered, multi-pronged approach. It's not something that you get through an assembly, correct? You start at an early age. We have to work on self-advocacy. We have to work on a sense of empathy. We have to work on building structures in place through education. And that's work that we're engaging in right now. The other part of it, though, and I thought was very important, is it talks about that when consequences don't work, we have to look at other ways to intervene in order to support people to make different behaviors. So what degree of it, I really can't speak to that. I can tell you that it's certainly not something that, it is, large parts of the plan does reflect our philosophy, and that those are things that we outlined in the DASA presentation, some of the plans that we have moving forward. And I think that they align with some of the suggestions that were made in the parents' plan.
Okay, so my final. I mentioned on September 7th, are we expected to turn a blind eye to how this student terrorized my daughter and wipe the slate clean? Well, now we can't because clearly they haven't stopped. What does the district do now? In my case, I was told that it was very hard to get a hold of the parents. Is that still the case? If so, clearly there is some kind of negligence. At what point do we act as mandated reporters, possibly call CPS? To this parent's case, she was told that it's very hard to get in contact with the parents, that a letter was being sent home. So we now are handling this child's behavior with a letter.
Not to my knowledge, and I can't talk about what was done on behalf to intervene on another student, certainly not through a letter.
Okay. Well, I'm just curious myself because, what's to stop him to come back and roundabout back to my daughter? So that's one. And two is clearly he hasn't stopped and it's happening. So we're still not handling the behavior. And to me, as a mom who went through it for months, is very, very frustrating because I am up here trying to prevent this from happening to another child, and here it is happening worse, not only to the child, but to the mother. The disgusting things that are being said to her or about her to this child. It's so past the line you can't even see the dot. So that's why I'm standing here and I said I'm not going away until this is fixed. So now, what other organizations, you mentioned, what other organizations are you looking to, aside from like?
So some of the organizations, we obviously have Lindy Cares, which is very active in this community, has been for a long time. That's one of the organizations we would look to work with, continue to work with. They've done wonderful work in this district for years. Town of Babylon offers a partnership. I actually attended a meeting this morning that was filled with stakeholders throughout the town of Babylon at large, and that included Project Outreach, it included New Horizons. There's a lot of resources available in this community. There's a wealth of resources, whether it's Rotarians and Kiwanis and so on and so forth. And I'm not just talking about empty building. I think what we need to do is bring our community together, perform a needs assessment to see where we are and we need, and then be able to identify the resources that we already have available, and then to fill it in the gaps.
Okay, so we haven't agreed on LICAP just yet. Is that my understanding?
We voted on it.
Oh, you did? I'm sorry. Okay, no, because I'm hearing Lindy Cares, and I'm just curious. Lindy Cares has been in the district. If it worked so well, why haven't we?
They're just one of the people that they're utilizing.
Just one, okay, well,
On the committee.
Lindy Cares does exceptional work in this community. I know that already. I've been here for 3 months. I can tell you that. Whether their specialization is not necessarily targeting and intervening on bullying, as Gloria Novello said at the last meeting, but they offer a wealth of support, particularly for students who are struggling. And I think when you look at the aggressors, oftentimes those are those students. And Lindy Cares is an organization that's invaluable to us.
okay, thank you.
Lindsay Bridges?
Good evening, board, parents, everyone from the community. I'm going to keep this brief. I know
Could I have your address, please?
217 33rd Street.
Thank you.
This is Hip Pocket. I'm only coming to address this now because of this meeting tonight, and I will continue it tomorrow with another meeting that I'm attending. There was an incident today at the middle school, and if anyone has middle school students who participate in after-school sports, well, there's another parent here that also experienced the same thing. There was vandalism, there was theft amongst the students that was on the field practicing. Now, I know there's a security, they have to do rounds, what have you, they don't have eyes in the back of their head. I know there's a camera, but where this particularly happened by the storage facility, I don't believe the camera would have captured whoever the individuals did what they did. And it's unfortunate, these kids out there still in school time with these activities, and this is, that we gotta come home to address the vandalism that took place and the theft. This equipment is not cheap. Now, what I want to just make you guys aware, if you haven't already, that this should not have to happen. And I was informed when the coaches was told about what happened. Oh, this is an ongoing thing. If it was an ongoing thing, then evidently it's not being addressed, because why did it even happen today?
okay? I'm not at all the sports activities and practicing, but something needs to be addressed, because the same kids that if they are Lindy kids or middle school kids or high school kids, they're gonna go through the whole district education system. So if they're in middle school, they're gonna do the same thing in high school. If they're high school kids, they're gonna still do it for other children. And this should not have to happen, especially when they doing extracurricular activities. That's all I have to say. I just wanted to state this on record.
Ms. Bridges, just a quick question.
Yes, sir.
Was this reported to the middle school, or this happened after school?
I wasn't physically there, but I did see a video of the after work that was taking place.
Okay.
And it was reported to two coaches, two of the football coaches, but I will be addressing the principal, Mr. Nakarati, and I will be attending the athletic meeting tomorrow evening.
All right, great. Thank you.
Kelly McQueen?
Hi, my name is Kelly McQueen. I'm at 305 37th Street.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I just had what Ms. Lindsay said, Bridges, about the vandalism. My son just told me that he came home and his water bottle was missing out of his bag, as well as a bunch of kids were sitting on the back of his backpack, which has his Chromebook in there. So I just wanted to know if there was a safe place that the kids could put their items when they're practicing for football. Where's the locker room, but I don't know. It's my first year with football, so I'm not sure.
I would imagine so, but I can't answer that definitively. This is obviously something that just arose this afternoon and evening that we need to look into. And, we'll certainly be speaking with the municipal administration. I've taken your name, and I know that they have to communicate with you as well.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Scott Bello?
Scott Belloff, 311 39th Street.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Davidson and board members. I'm a current senior at the high school, and I've been in the swim program since 7th grade. During the off season, we have always trained with the Islanders, which is a private swim club, at our high school pool. Coach Mark, the owner of the club, has held the off-season workouts at the high school for years. When COVID hit, the high school pool was shut down and practice could no longer be held there. Coach Mark worked with the Lindenhurst swimmers and found a pool that we could practice in during the pandemic. When everything started to open back up in the high school pool stayed closed. Coach Mark was only able to secure the Sayville Middle School pool. Between rush hour and carpooling with the other Lindenhurst swimmers, the whole ride was close to an hour. By the time practice ended and everyone was home, this ended up being a 4-hour venture for just a 2-hour practice. Realistically, we were only able to attend practice twice a week due to school events and homework. This year, Coach Mark was unable to afford the major increase in rent at the high school pool. Unfortunately, as of now, Sayville is the only option for us varsity boys, and this year we just can't make it out there. It's not realistic. This past season, the varsity swim team sent 5 boys to counties. All 5 boys swam for the Islanders under Coach Mark. And 4 boys, including myself, went all week. Islanders Aquatics has always provided excellent training at a reasonable price and a convenient location. Can you please find a way to work this out with Coach Mark so that the varsity swimmers have somewhere to train in the off-season? The school doesn't offer any off-season training for its swimmers, unlike other sports. This is the only way to get into shape for the season, and we would very much like to compete in counties again and possibly states. Can you please work something reasonable out with Coach Mark so the varsity boys have a place to swim in the off-season? Thank you.
Thank you. Scott, certainly we would have your coach reach out to us and we could talk about what the fee schedules are, and I know that's a complication. I haven't heard from him, I don't know if he's here, but I do want to commend you. You're everything that this district stands for. You've voiced yourself, you've voiced your concerns, you've done it respectfully so, and we certainly hear you. Thank you.
Lori Bello? Lori Bello?
Good evening, Lori Bello, 311 39th Street.
Thank you.
I
I also am here to speak about bringing Islanders Aquatics back to the Lindenhurst High School pool. It is my understanding that prior to COVID, Mark Dannon from Islanders Aquatics rented our high school pool for $10,000. Mr. Dannon provided swim lessons and training for many of the kids in the Lindenhurst community, including my son and other middle school and varsity swimmers. Mr. Dannon's prices were very affordable for us. Before originally signing up with Islanders Aquatics, we had shopped around, and Islanders Aquatics was very affordable. So throughout the time that the Lindenhurst High School pool was closed due to COVID, Mr. Dannon continued to do the right thing by the Lindenhurst community. He offered us a discounted rate for our kids to swim at the Sayville Middle School pool, knowing that it would be difficult for us to get there consistently. He didn't charge us during the varsity season last year, and he told us that we had an open invitation to train with him whenever we wanted during that time. So now that COVID is over, the high school pool has opened again. I understand that Mr. Dannon was going to be charged $80,000, an 800% increase, which I guess is kind of crazy. I know that other parents spoke at the last board meeting, and there has been some emails back and forth, and it seems the price to rent in the pool has come down a bit, but not enough to make it affordable. It wouldn't be Mr. Dannon paying for the increase in rent, it would be us, the families of the swimmers. Islanders Aquatics would no longer be affordable for us and most other families. So besides the fact that Islanders Aquatics would no longer be affordable, there would be no place for our swimmers to train during the off-season. Lindenhurst School District does not offer off-season or preseason training of any kind for its swimmers. I know it does for many of its other sports, but not swimming. So for the past 6 years, I've paid for my son to train with Islanders Aquatics to keep him in shape and prepare him for the school season. I hope you will hear us and please reconsider. Time is running out for these boys. Please know that you are really renting a pool to the members of the Lindenhurst community, not Islanders Aquatics.
Thank you.
Mrs. Hoffman, may I ask a question?
Yes. Martina.
I'm just curious, how much does that $10,000, how often do the kids get to swim?
I can't speak to the $10,000 that we've been told that was paid. I can tell you that the fee schedules are, the request, I think, has been for 2 days a week for 2 hours. The fee schedule, the district approves fee schedule has what they call level 1, 2, 3, and 4 fee schedule. This was moved to a level 2 in order to try to accommodate it. There's a 3-hour minimum. I know the district came and agreed to a 2-hour, to allow for the 2-hour prorated instead of requiring the 3-hour minimum. But I do know that there's a significant gap from what's being reported and what our fee schedule is. And that's why I would ask the company to reach out to us so that we can sit and have a conversation.
So you said it was 1 or 2 times a week?
Twice a week, I believe, right? Is it twice a week, 2 hours?
4 times a week.
I'm sorry, 4 times, I take that back, 4 times a week for 2 hours. For the, I think it was for the entirety
5 days a
of
week
the.
at the $10,000 rate? Yes. Okay. Thanks, guys.
Okay, so you're gonna get more information from us?
Yes, I can provide the board with more information, but I would ask if the owner would reach out to us, and then we can sit and talk. Thank you.
Mr. Murphy,
Sure.
it's at the bottom of the list.
Just a couple things from historical reference.
Historical.
Edward Murphy, 108 First Avenue.
Thank you.
2 things. First, I know that the safety zone requirements are almost impossible. You know, many, many years ago, we were on austerity and the state transportation. Kids had to cross Sunrise Highway by the hundreds. So it's probably not going to happen, you know, for anybody with that. But I think that the fact we did use TransFinder for many, many years. So the fact that, you know, maybe the software changed this year and, you know, you consider going back to TransFinder, and the fact the board made the, you know, adjustments that they're looking to make. I commend you guys. You answered the community and, you know, good job on that one.
Thank you, Eddie.
Yes, yes.
Okay, do we have any unfinished business? Any new, excuse me? Any new business? Mrs. Cunningham has new business.
Just quickly, every we sent out the 2022 proposed resolutions for NISBA. So if you all could take a look at this, because then we'll discuss it briefly in our next meeting, just so that when I go to do the vote for NISBA, I know the wishes of the board, how you'd like me to vote. All right, so just, I think Denise sent it on to Mary. The vote is October 17th, so if we do it for the next meeting, that's just fine.
Okay, cool.
Thanks.
If I could just ask administration, for a number of reasons, I think both interior of the building and exterior of the middle school, if we could look at potentially new cameras or reevaluating the security camera plan at the middle school. I was unaware of the vandalism incident that Ms. Bridges and Ms. McQueen brought up this evening, so thank you for bringing that up. But between that and between, I believe, students in the middle school are smart enough to realize where there's areas of coverage and where there's not areas of coverage in the middle school. So I'm not looking for a Band-Aid for a quick fix, but I think as part of a district-wide plan, if we could make that a priority to go and reevaluate that.
Absolutely, Mr. Lang. Absolutely, Mr. Lingo. And I know in the next few months, we're looking at the capacity to capture smart bond money that's available to us that will be no cost to taxpayers in order for us to really upgrade to a state-of-the-art camera system throughout the district.
Thank you.